Listen carefully, because adding this simple mechanical tweak to how I map market structure completely transformed my trading. Now, when the market volatility drastically picked up at the start of 2022, where we had the Russia and Ukraine war and tons of other high impact fundamental news events around the world, my strategy back then at the time, it was giving me a lot of false signals where I was getting into trades too early. And then, when the actual move would go, I was too hesitant to take that one because of the previous losses I'd taken. And then when these big sort of massive swing ranges were forming, there was price action in the middle that I couldn't quite mechanically deal with as confidently as I would have liked to. So then my trading just took, real damage to my confidence, because I was either taking a lot of early and unnecessary losses, or I was sitting on my hands for a week waiting for clearer structure to develop. But once I implemented this mechanical tweak, I'm now on the right side of the market, probably about 90% of the time. Now look, that's not having a 90% win rate, but I mean getting the correct directional bias right far more often than not. I'm also now capitalizing on a ton more high probability setups, even when we get that complex structure forming, rather than having to sit on my hands for weeks. And as a result, my confidence has absolutely skyrocketed, and I've never had more clarity in my trading. Now, my name is Matt Donlevy, and I'm the founder of Photon Trading, and we have helped hundreds of traders acquire funding and scale their capital using the power of mechanical strategies. Now, I shared a tiny glimpse into the mechanical framework that we use with market structure on YouTube back in 2021, and those videos absolutely blew up. I really wasn't expecting it, but I think it just shows how people really resonate with the power of using a mechanical framework. Now, I would highly recommend you go and check those videos out if you haven't already, but the very simple premise of that mechanical market structure framework was that every time we have a swing break of structure, so a boss, we would expect a swing pullback on that time frame, right? Simple enough. Swing break of structure, we then expect a swing pullback. And we were running with the very simple but powerful idea that to anticipate when that swing pullback is going to occur is that we would see something called a change of character, okay, where we get that small shift in structure, and when we get that shock, that change of character, we could then anticipate that pullback. Likewise, we then expect that pullback to pull up, but this would be a strong swing high, right? That's a strong high that took out the low, so we'd expect price to pull up, but not break this high. So then how can we anticipate the end of the swing pullback? Well, you guessed it, we would just look for a shock in the opposite direction, and that change of character, that small fractal break in structure, that would signal the end of the swing pullback, and then we could look to short and target the weak swing low. Why is it weak? It's weak because it did not do its job, right? It didn't take out the high. So all of that was covered in depth in that market structure series, and it was very simple and powerful. If I could just show you some quick examples here, right? Euro-dollar 4-hour chart, where after a swing break of structure, what do we expect? We expect a 4-hour pullback, and that's where we would get the change of character, right? That small shift in structure, signaling the end of the pullback, right? We pull down into towards a strong swing low, so we're expecting that high low to form, bullish change of character, signaling the end of the swing pullback, and then we can target the weak swing high, right? Same thing again, boss, expect a pullback, we get our change of character, and then we eventually break to the upside. Then we get a bearish shift in swing structure, so we now shift bearish, this becomes our strong high, and we look for the pullback. We get our bullish change of character, signaling the start of that pullback. We come into our strong high, right? We expect this swing high to hold. So how can we signal the end of the swing pullback? We look for that bearish change of character. There we go. We get that small shift in structure, signaling the end of the swing pullback. And now it's all systems go to target the weak swing low, and we can look for shorts to take out that low. Again, another break of structure. So we expect a swing pullback. There's our small bullish change of character, and now we can look to play the pullback, right? But we're only targeting longs up to where? Up to the strong swing high, right? This is the swing high that took out the low. We don't expect that to break, so on and so forth, right? Then we get the bearish chock, signals the end of the pullback, and then we can look for high probability shorts to take out the low. Same thing again, right? We get the pullback, and then we get a bearish chock, signaling the end of the pullback, and then we can look for shorts to target the low and beyond. So very simple when you get your head around it, and very powerful. But as I was saying at the start of the video, what I found is when that volatility picked up at the start of 2022, far more often than not, I was getting a lot of false signals on trying to time the start and end of those swing pullbacks. Now look, we don't just trade market structure, we use supply and demand, and we use liquidity concepts in depth, which massively help with this, but there's still room to optimize your market structure framework on its own. And that's the tweak I'm going to give you guys today that made a huge difference to my trading. Now, it will seem quite simple, but I promise you, if you implement this correctly, it's honestly massive. So Like we said, right, when we get a break of structure, we look for that bullish change of character as a signal to start to, try and anticipate we're going to get that swing pullback. And then as we get up here, right, we look for a bearish shock in the opposite direction, and then that signals the end, or at least that's the old way. But what I was finding when price was quite volatile, we'd get a chock. I'd potentially then look to get long, thinking that that was a signal that the swing pullback had started. And you guessed it, you take a loss, full signal, okay? Then we'd maybe get another bullish chock here, get long, no, full signal, right? And you can take a few losses, and then you get the chock, and then it goes. And then that would be the trade I ended up missing. You guessed it, right? I'm sure you've all felt that cycle of fear, doubt, and hesitation, and then you get annoyed when you miss the move. And then again, right, we'd then be in these big ranges because it'd be a huge swing range, right? Because price would have sold off quite aggressively. And then to be all the structure in the middle, and I would see a bearish chock, but I kind of know, well, we haven't quite pulled up to premium, we haven't mitigated our levels, etc., etc. There's going to be tons of chocks that happen in here because chock is a very, very aggressive shift in structure. They happen frequently. So we only really want to pay attention to them in high value areas. So when price was in the middle doing all sorts in here for days or even weeks at a time, that's where I was either having to sit on my hands or just get stuck in there and have a bit of a lower strike rate. Okay. So here's a new way. We now have what we call 3 types of structure. Okay. So before we just had what we called swing and essentially fractal, which is change of character. But now we use something called internal. Okay. So again, it's pretty simple. But basically, when we have the swing break of structure, what do we expect? We expect the swing pullback, right? So we can look for a change of character down here. Now, that's a very, very early signal. But for me now, when I see a change of character, rather than saying that that signals the start of a swing pullback, for me, it just signals the start of an internal pullback, okay? Because what can happen is you can just get a change of character, price can pull back a little bit, and then we can go lower, right? And that's not quite a swing pullback just yet. So it's only when I get an internal pullback where we see that larger move like this, and you have that clearer internal structure, and you get what's called an IBOS, so an internal break of structure. Now I have a lot more confirmation that that swing pullback is actually happening. Okay, so for me, that internal structure, when that shifts bullish and you get an IBOS, that signals the start and end of a swing pullback. Okay, so I'll wait for the IBOS to signal the swing pullback is starting. And likewise, I'll wait for the IBOS to occur in the opposite direction to signal that the swing pullback is finished, and we're now looking to target that next leg to the downside. Because otherwise, if you just use chock as your signal for that, you're going to take a lot of losses. And let me explain, right? So if we get a chock down here, okay, we get the movement up, and then we get a chock up here, that just signals the start and end of an internal pullback, right? So we get that internal pullback, then we get a bullish chock, signaling that that internal pullback may now be over, and now we can target that weak internal high, right? And then we look for price to move to the upside. We now have that IBOS, and that's a very strong signal we're getting that deeper swing pullback. This now becomes your strong internal low, right? Then you look for the chock, and you can play that pullback down into here. Bullish chock signals the end of the pullback, and then we get the movement. Hopefully you can kind of see that relation now. The change of character signals the start and end of the internal pullback. So if this is our swing structure, and this is our strong swing high, and this is our strong swing low, we've pulled up to the premium levels. We know that, or we expect that this high is going to hold, and we want to try and capture that swing lower high to get that big move targeting that low, right? What can we look for our sign? Well, if we're at this moment, this is a strong internal low and this is our weak internal high, but we're looking for that internal structure to shift bearish, okay? Because this whole time, the internal structure shifted bullish to facilitate that swing pullback, okay? So when you get the bearish internal break of structure, that's our strong confirmation that now it's all systems go to target the weak low, okay? Because we get a change of character up here, and that's our first early signal. So we can get in and look for shorts here, anticipating that our low is going to go, right? Because we're doing it in a high value area, extreme supply at the strong high, all that good stuff. But it's only once we get this break here that's when we have true confirmation, because what can happen in some circumstances is we could get a bearish chock, come down into this strong internal low, and then we could get a bullish chock, the strong internal low holds, the internal structure remains bullish, and then we could go on to those highs, okay? So we can look for shorts here, but we have to realize that we're trading into a strong low, an internal low. Once that IBOS occurs, the internal structure is now bearish. It's now realigned itself with the swing structure. And now what do we expect? Well, because we've had a bearish IBOS here, this becomes our new strong internal high. This is our new internal range. And then we can look to play this internal range, get a bearish chock at the strong internal high. And this is a super high probability position because now you have swing, internal, and fractal all aligned bearish in a high value area. And then we can look to target the low. Okay. Now, this might be quite simple to some of you, but it has some very, very powerful when you apply it to the charts, it can have a very powerful effect because you can get quite complex structure. This is obviously quite a nice simple diagram, but once you get that bearish IBOS and we have the internal structure realigned with the swing structure, we can then follow that internal structure the whole way down because what you'll see very, very often is once that alignment happens, those bearish ranges will hold the entire way down. So that gives you a lot more confidence selling in low value areas down here, near lows, where perhaps I wouldn't usually do that, selling in a discount. But it's because the objective has been complete, the swing pullback is over, and now we can follow those internal structures the whole way down with confidence. Why? Because every time we get an IBOS, this is strong structure. We want to sell from strong structure. Another IBOS, right? We want to sell from that strong structure and continue down, okay? So before we hop in the charts, I just want to show you one slight tweak to this, okay? Because this is an example where you get very, very volatile price action and it kind of just goes down and you barely get any real pullbacks, but then you get a big pullback. So where the IBOS happens is here, where you kind of get this internal pullback within here, then you get that clear IBOS, and now you can work with this internal structure, right? But the slight other variation to that is where you have this, okay? Whereas you get you get the movement down, okay? And you get a bit of a pullback, so it's not just a little fractal pullback, what we use for chalk, but you get that internal pullback, and it's not quite big enough to be string structure, right? You can clearly see that, but it's obviously more significant than fractal. And then we get another movement down, okay? So this is your internal leg. This is your strong internal high. We then get a bullish change of character. So that's our first early signal that the fractal structure is shifting and that larger swing pullback might be happening, but we don't have confirmation of that right yet, because remember, what does fractal structure signal when that changes trends, when we get that chalk? It just signals the start and end of an internal pullback. So when we get that change of character down here, we can only expect that it might just be an internal pullback into this strong internal high, right? And we can look for a move into here. That high could hold and we could get another sell-off. And you'll see this a lot when price is volatile and there's a lot of room to work with. This is, again, going to give you that confidence to keep following that structure to the downside. But in this case, what do we get? We get the bullish IBOS. So now the internal structure has shifted bullish. What does that signal? That signals the start of the swing pullback, okay? So now what we can do is trade counter swing trend, trade that swing pullback with a lot of confidence, because now this becomes our strong internal low, this is our weak internal high, and when we pull back into the discount of this internal range and we get that bullish change of character, what does that bullish chalk signal? It signals the end of the internal pullback. So now we can get long and we can target the weak internal high. Do you see how that framework all holds itself together now? It's simple, but it's so powerful. Trust me, when you get in some complex structure situations, or when you need that confidence to trade counter trend and how far to push it and where to target, honestly, it makes such a big difference. So then likewise, this is all the same stuff, so I won't go over it, but that was just a slight tweak, okay? Sometimes you get the internal pullback in the actual impulsive leg down, and then in the first scenario, sometimes you don't get that, but you get a big pullback here, and then when you get that clear internal shift, okay, we can just start mapping our internal structure from there, because otherwise you've got nothing to work with from within here, okay? And that's now how, when you get these big ranges and sometimes get complex price action within, you can now capitalize on that with a ton more confident. So let's take a look at examples on the chart. Alrighty, so I've pre-drawn on some analysis just to keep this video a little bit short, because knowing me, I could turn this into a 3-hour video, okay? But let's go over that same framework, right? So we have a break of structure. As soon as we get that break of structure, we have to have aware in the back of our minds that that swing pullback could kick in at any moment. But as we can clearly see here, when the market is volatile, and maybe when there's not a lot of demand or structure to the left, price can fall for quite some time, okay? So we don't want to get caught either trying to trade that reversal and get long with all these signals, but we also want to have a lot of confidence of, when can we just keep shorting this? Why, we can keep following this if we want, while still being aware that that pullback can happen. And that's where we can just keep following the internal structure, okay? You get that clear internal pullback, and then we can continue down, right? And then that becomes our strong internal high, and we still haven't yet had that pullback. So I'm just going to zoom in, okay, so we can see. So this whole time, although I'm expecting that swing pullback, my signal for when that is starting is what? Remember, it's the internal break of structure. I need that IBOS, okay, to signal that we're getting that swing pullback. So we get quite a sizable pullback here, but not quite big enough relative to that recent price action for me to call it swing structure. So for me, that's just an internal pullback. We get another break of the low. So now this is my strong internal high. This is my internal low. Now, down here, it's a bit subtle to see, but that is a bullish change of character. This candle here, it fails to break the previous candle's low. So we do get that fractal pullback, which means we get a bullish chalk. So with my old framework, that's when I would go, okay, swing pullback's now starting. We've had a bullish change of character. I'd get long, and then boom, smashed. Okay, you get another full signal. But now we know that just signals the start of an internal pullback. What do we pull up to? We pull up into the premium of this internal leg. Internal pullback's now over, and now we go down. Okay, and then eventually, what do we get? We get the IBOS, and there's a nice liquidation there as well. But we'll bring in liquidity concepts and other things in following videos. So then we get the IBOS. Now what we have? Now we have that confirmed, really, really strong confirmation that we can now anticipate the swing pullback, because we've got this massive swing range, right? It's a really big volatile swing range, and we don't know how far price can pull, but we're essentially expecting that this is our strong high and we can pull up into the premium of that leg, which, spoiler alert, we can obviously see is what happens. But once we got that break here, we can now trade up to the EQ of this leg, up to where there's supply that led to the boss with confidence, okay? Because we have these internal ranges to work with. So we get that internal leg to the upside. This becomes our strong internal low. And as soon as we get our bullish change of character, we can look to play the internal pullback, right? And what does it pull back into? The EQ of the internal leg. We can now expect that internal high low to form. So if we're looking for that internal pullback to end and target the next high, what can we look for? What signals the start and end of internal pullbacks? Fractal structure does, right? When that changes, so we look for the change of character. That high takes the low, so that's our bullish change of character. So that's when we get the bullish chock, mitigated the EQ of the leg. We can then look to get long within here and target with confidence up towards this 4-hour high. So this whole week, then you can look for longs targeting the high, then we get it. What do we expect after an IBOS? We expect an internal pullback. How can we anticipate the start of that internal pullback? What do we get? There's a chock, right? That's a fractal low. We take out the low, now we can trade the pullback. Okay, but how far? Well, the internal structure is bullish. This is our strong internal low, right? So we look for the pullback down into the discount, into extreme demand, sweeps a nice liquidity there as well. And what do we get? We get a bullish change of character, right? Fractal structure, when that change of the fractal structure change, which is what we call a chock, when that happens, that signals the end of the internal pullback. In a high value area, we can then look for longs to target what? Target the weak internal high. Now, this is the key, right? You don't just want to keep necessarily blindly following your internal structure forever, because swing structure is king. The internal structure fulfills the objective of swing structure in the same way that the fractal structure fulfills the objective of the internal structure. So what do I mean by that? Well, why did the internal structure shift bullish? What is its objective? Well, its objective is to facilitate the swing pullback to premium levels of supply, right? Now that we've done that, we've come up to the EQ. Like I said, we're not going to get into supply and demand and all that fun stuff. We're now at that level where we can expect that the internal structure has done its job. The swing pullback is complete. So now we can look to target the weak swing low, okay? So at this point, we can start to get in early. We can trade counter to the internal trend. Ideally, we would have got a 4-hour chock. In this case, we don't because it's all the way down here. But if you look at the M15, there was a beautiful, beautiful trading opportunity here where we got the M15 shifting bearish. Beautiful trade-off here. And then you can target all the way down there. Now, I'm not in the business and the interest of trying to catch those ridiculous, massive trades, but you can only capture a small movement of these trades and do extremely well. But the whole point of this is understanding that framework, okay, of what to anticipate. Now, it's only once we get this IBOS here that technically we have true confirmation that the swing pullback is finished. And then that's when we can expect those bearish internal ranges to hold. But obviously what you'll find is markets move with impulses, correction impulses. So typically you get a lot of internal ranges on the pullback, but once that pullback's complete, very often you know it's not going to pull back that deep and give you a lot of internal ranges on the way down because the source systems go now to target that weak low. Okay, so pretty powerful. We can help you. I'll just show you one more example. Go through this one a bit more quickly, but essentially we've got another big swing range here. Okay, for me this pullback wasn't quite big enough relative to the recent pullbacks, right, to count it as swing structure. So what can we look for? We can call it internal structure. Look for the IBOS to the upside. Okay. So now you've got this big swing range to work with and you can get a lot of price action in the middle. And this is before where I'd get thrown around a little bit. But because we have our internal structure frameworks, you can just see now what happens. We switch bullish, we pull back down into the strong low, right? We look for those changes of character. We get a nice liquidation as well into extreme demand. And then we can look to what? Follow these internal ranges to take out the high. Then we look for another bearish chock and then follow the bearish ranges down into where? Down into the strong internal low, right? It's the same thing. Then we look for that movement to the upside. Obviously come into our nice extreme demand zone, and then we look to target where? Target the weak internal high again. Now, that whole time, yes, the swing structure is bearish, and we'd expect that swing lower high to form. But if you can anticipate, using other things, multi-time frame analysis and whatnot, you can follow the internal structure with confidence to the upside, right? And this can really help you to clean things up. Rather than just, oh, the whole time I'm going to wait for a short, I'm just going to wait for a chock up here. You can then trade all of this within it, because what some of you might have noticed with these large internal ranges is within that you get internal price action, right? You can follow these internal ranges within here down into the low. Then you get that what we call an II boss, so the internal structure, but it's just the same framework. So now we can follow these internal ranges. You see how they're all respected to the upside, right? It just sweeps that low, but they're all hold. And then same thing, you get this nice internal structure to the downside, fail to close above it, right? It's respected. Then we come down and then we shift structure to the upside and we hold, okay? So that's it. It's as simple as that. Use this framework, right? Just remind yourself, a chalk. So when that fractal structure changes trend, all that signals is the start and end of an internal pullback. It's an early sign that swing pullback may be starting or ending, but really we only use it to confirm internal structure. When the internal structure changes trend, that's when it signals the start and end of the swing pullbacks. And we can follow those ranges, okay? So when you get that bearish IBOS and the internal structure realigns itself with the swing structure, you can now trade with confidence and follow these ranges the whole way. We expect these ranges to hold the whole way down. And if they don't hold, because sometimes that will happen, price will come down and then you see maybe a bullish shift, that's when you then know this whole leg has failed to done its job. This high is now weak, and you'll see this. And now you can follow these bullish internal ranges all the way up to target that weak high, okay? And you can get quite technical with this concept, but once you understand the basic framework of this, it is super powerful, okay? So if you want to see how it's best to implement this framework with some other simple mechanical tools, take a look at these and I will see you over there.